Did you know a fragile Mohawk girl, scarred by smallpox and sorrow, would one day become a radiant sign of God's grace? Rejected by her people, drawn by Christ, she chose purity, prayer, and courage over comfort, walking a hidden path toward holiness. Across hardship, silence, and love, her life became a bridge between worlds and a witness to heaven. This is the story of Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. Chapter 1. The world she was born into and her childhood. In the 17th century, North America was a land of encounter and tension. Indigenous nations lived according to ancient traditions, while European settlers arrived with new ambitions, beliefs, and conflicts. Trade, war, and cultural exchange intertwined daily life. It was a time of uncertainty and transformation, where different worlds met, sometimes in peace, often in struggle, shaping the environment into which Kateri Tekakwitha would be born. Among these nations, the Mohawk people lived with a strong sense of community and identity. Their villages were structured around family clans, shared labor, and spiritual traditions passed down through generations. Life was deeply communal, and every individual had a role within the tribe. Their beliefs were closely tied to nature, honor, and ancestral customs, forming a rich cultural world that guided both daily life and spiritual understanding. It was into this world that Kateri was born around 1,656 inches, the village of Osernanon, in what is now New York. Her father was a respected Mohawk chief, while her mother, originally an Algonquin woman, had been baptized into the Catholic faith. Though Kateri was not raised as a Christian from birth, this quiet connection to the faith would later become a hidden seed planted within her life. Her given name, Tekakwitha, carries a humble and poignant meaning, she who bumps into things. This name reflected her weakened eyesight, a lasting consequence of illness. Yet beyond its literal sense, it also seems to echo the fragile path she would walk in life, marked by struggle, vulnerability, and a quiet perseverance that would eventually lead her toward God in unexpected and profound ways. When Kateri was still a young child, a devastating smallpox epidemic swept through her village. The disease claimed the lives of her parents and her younger brother, leaving her alone in a world suddenly stripped of familial warmth. Though she survived, her face was marked with scars and her vision remained impaired. These wounds, both visible and hidden, would shape her identity and her place within the community. After this tragedy, Kateri was taken in by her uncle and aunt, members of the Turtle clan. Under their care, she grew up learning the customs and responsibilities of Mohawk life. She worked diligently alongside other young women, mastering the skills expected of her. Yet even within this structured environment, there remained a quiet distance, as if her soul were already searching for something beyond what surrounded her. From an early age, Kateri was known for her gentle and reserved nature. She avoided large gatherings, often keeping to herself, not only because of her scars but also because of her inward disposition. There was a depth in her silence, a sensitivity that set her apart. In this quietness, the foundation of her spiritual life was being formed, preparing her, in ways unseen, for the grace that would one day transform her entirely. Chapter 2. Turmoil and the First Encounters with Faith. In 1666, when Kateri was still a young girl, violence swept across her homeland. French forces attacked Mohawk territories, burning villages and forcing families to flee into the wilderness. Fear and loss marked those days, as homes were destroyed and the stability of tribal life was shaken. For Kateri, this upheaval became part of her formative years, a reminder that the world she knew could change suddenly and painfully. After this conflict, a fragile peace was established between the Mohawk and the French. As part of the agreement, Jesuit missionaries were allowed to enter Mohawk villages and share their faith. These men came not as warriors, but as witnesses to a different way of life. They brought with them teachings about one God, about love, sacrifice, and salvation, ideas both foreign and quietly compelling to those who listened. It was during this time that Kateri first encountered these missionaries. She saw their presence in the village, heard their voices, and observed their way of living. Though she remained at a distance, something about them stirred her curiosity. They spoke with conviction, yet with gentleness. For a young girl marked by suffering and silence, their message carried a tone unlike anything she had known before. The missionaries understood that to be heard, they needed to speak in ways the Mohawk people could understand. They used familiar images, stories, and symbols drawn from nature and daily life. Through these adapted teachings, the gospel slowly became more accessible. Kateri listened, perhaps without fully grasping everything, yet sensing that behind these words was a truth that reached deeper than mere explanation. During times of conflict and recovery, Kateri also took part in helping those who suffered. Alongside others, she assisted in caring for the wounded, bringing water, preparing food, and tending to the needs of her people. These acts of service were simple, yet meaningful. In them, her natural compassion began to grow, forming a heart that would later reflect the love she would come to know in Christ. At the same time, she remained immersed in the traditions of her people. She witnessed ceremonies such as the Feast of the Dead, where ancestors were honored with deep reverence. Yet, she also saw the tension between these practices and the teachings of the missionaries, who questioned certain rituals. Without fully understanding, Kateri stood at the intersection of two spiritual worlds, each claiming truth and meaning. Within her, a quiet struggle began to take shape. She did not openly choose one path over the other, but her heart was no longer untouched. Something had awakened in her, a desire to understand, to seek, to discern. Between the traditions she had inherited and the faith she was discovering, Kateri began a journey not yet visible to others, but already guiding her slowly toward God. Chapter 3: Vocation and the Journey of Conversion. As Kateri grew into adolescence, she embraced the responsibilities expected of a young Mohawk woman. She learned to weave mats, prepare food, gather crops, and care for the needs of her household. Her hands were diligent, her movements quiet and steady. Outwardly, she lived like others around her, fulfilling her duties faithfully, while inwardly, something deeper was slowly awakening within her heart. According to custom, her family soon began to speak of marriage. In Mohawk society, this was not only expected but essential for the continuity of the clan. Her aunts encouraged her to consider suitable matches, believing it was her rightful path. Yet these conversations brought unease to her soul. What others saw as a natural step in life, Kateri experienced as a quiet but persistent resistance within. More than once, she was brought before young men as a potential bride, yet she found ways to withdraw. At times, she would remain silent. At other times, she would simply walk away. There were moments when she fled from the cabin to avoid these encounters altogether. Her refusals were not acts of rebellion, but expressions of a deeper calling she could not yet fully explain. Gradually, that inner voice became clearer. Kateri began to sense that her life was meant for something different, something wholly given to God. Without fully understanding the language of consecration, she felt drawn toward a life of purity and devotion. In her heart, a quiet desire took root, to belong entirely to the one she had only begun to know, yet already deeply loved. This desire found direction when she encountered the Jesuit missionary Jacques de Lamberville. Unlike earlier, distant impressions of missionaries, this meeting became personal. She spoke openly of her longing to understand the Christian faith. Patiently, he began to teach her the catechism, guiding her step by step into the truths of the gospel. nurturing the fragile but growing flame within her. The journey that followed was not easy. Kateri had to discern in silence, often under the watchful eyes of those who opposed her interest in Christianity. She carried her questions and struggles within, weighing the cost of belief. Yet, through prayer, reflection, and quiet perseverance, her conviction deepened. She was no longer simply curious. She was being drawn into a relationship that would require her whole life. In 1676, after this period of preparation and discernment, Kateri received baptism. On that day, she was given the name Catherine, or Kateri, in her own language. It was more than a new name. It was a new beginning. From that moment forward, she chose Christ as the center of her life. In the silence of her heart, she had found her answer, and she would never turn back. Chapter 4. Persecution and the decision to leave home. After her baptism, Kateri's life changed, not only within, but also around her. What had once been quiet curiosity now became a visible commitment. Her community began to look at her differently, with suspicion and unease. Some believed she had abandoned the ways of her people, while others questioned her loyalty. The faith that brought her peace also became the reason she was set apart. This growing tension soon turned into open hostility. Kateri was mocked for her beliefs, ridiculed for her refusal to follow traditional practices, and at times even threatened. Stones were thrown, harsh words spoken, and her presence became unwelcome in places where she once belonged. She endured these trials in silence, not responding with anger, but holding firmly to the truth she had embraced. As days passed, it became increasingly difficult for her to live out her faith freely. She desired to honor the Lord's Day, to pray, and to follow the teachings she had received. Yet her environment resisted these choices. Simple acts of devotion became sources of conflict. In a place that had once been her home, she now felt like a stranger, unable to fully live the life she believed God was calling her to. Within her own household, the pressure did not cease. Her family continued to insist that she marry, seeing it as her duty and her future. They could not understand her decision to remain unmarried, nor her devotion to a faith they did not share. Each conversation, each expectation, became another weight upon her heart, testing her resolve and deepening her quiet suffering. This isolation grew heavier with time. Kateri found herself alone not only in belief, but in daily life. Conversations faded, trust weakened, and even simple companionship became rare. Yet in this solitude, her relationship with God deepened. The pain she endured did not harden her spirit, but refined it, drawing her closer to the one who had first called her in silence. Gradually, a realization took shape within her. If she was to live her faith fully, she would need to leave. It was not a decision made lightly. To leave meant to abandon everything familiar, her land, her people, her past. Yet she understood that true freedom in Christ sometimes required great sacrifice. In prayer and reflection, she found the courage to consider a path she had never imagined before. With quiet determination, Kateri chose to depart from her village. She set out on a long and difficult journey of nearly 300 kilometers toward the Christian community at Kanawake. It was a journey marked by uncertainty, but also by hope. Step by step, she walked away from rejection and toward a life where her faith could flourish, trusting that God Himself would guide her forward. Chapter 5. Life in Kanawake and Spiritual Growth. After a long and difficult journey, Kateri finally arrived at the mission village of Kanawake near Montreal. This place was unlike her former home. It was a community formed by indigenous converts who had chosen to embrace the Christian faith. For the first time, she found herself surrounded by people who shared her beliefs, offering her a sense of belonging she had long desired. In this new environment, Kateri began to live more freely as a Christian. The rhythms of daily life were shaped by prayer, work, and mutual support among the faithful. Though many had come from different tribes and backgrounds, they were united by a common faith. Within this community, Kateri no longer had to hide her devotion. Instead, her faith was welcomed, encouraged, and gently strengthened. The missionaries who served at Kanawake played an important role in guiding her spiritual life. They offered instruction, correction, and encouragement as she continued to grow in understanding. Through their care, Kateri deepened her knowledge of the teachings she had received. Yet, her growth was not only intellectual, it was a transformation of the heart, shaped by grace and sustained through faithful perseverance. Kateri's love for prayer began to flourish in this setting. She spent long hours in quiet communion with God, often rising early or staying awake into the night. Her devotion to the Eucharist became central to her life, drawing her ever closer to Christ. In the silence of prayer, she found strength, peace, and a deep sense of intimacy with the one she had chosen to follow. Alongside her prayer, Kateri embraced a life of sacrifice. She practiced fasting and small acts of penance, offering them as a way to unite herself with the suffering of Christ. Though her health was fragile, her desire to give herself completely was strong. These acts were not expressions of harshness, but of love, a longing to share in the life of the Lord she adored. During this time, she formed a close spiritual friendship with another young woman, Marie-Thérèse. Together, they encouraged one another in faith and shared a desire to belong entirely to God. They even hoped to establish a form of religious life within their community. Though this dream was not realized, their companionship became a source of strength and joy along the journey. In the quiet depth of her soul, Kateri made a firm decision. She chose to consecrate herself entirely to Christ, offering her life as a gift of love. Though she would never receive formal recognition as a consecrated virgin, her intention was clear and sincere. From that moment on, she lived as a bride of Christ, faithful and devoted, her heart fully given to Him alone. Chapter 6. Final Years and a Holy Death. As the years passed, Kateri's health began to weaken noticeably. Her body, already marked by illness since childhood, struggled under the weight of her fasting and penances. Yet, she never complained. What others saw as fragility, she accepted with quiet surrender. Her suffering was not meaningless to her. It became a way to unite herself more deeply with Christ, who had given everything out of love. Despite her growing weakness, Kateri remained faithful to her daily rhythm of prayer and service. She continued to help within the community as much as her strength allowed, offering small acts of kindness and care. Even when her body could do little, her presence became a source of peace for others. In her, people saw not only suffering, but a gentle light that pointed beyond this world. As Holy Week approached in the year 1680, Kateri's condition worsened. Those around her began to understand that her life on earth was drawing to a close, yet there was a quiet beauty in these final days. As the Church remembered the Passion of Christ, Kateri herself entered into that mystery. Her suffering seemed to echo the Lord's own journey toward the cross, marked by love and surrender. In these sacred moments, she received the last sacraments with deep devotion. The presence of the priests and the prayers of the community surrounded her with grace. There was no fear in her, only a calm readiness. Her heart, which had long belonged to God, now prepared to meet Him fully. Each prayer, each gesture, became a step closer to the eternal home she had long desired. On the 17th of April, 1680, Kateri quietly passed from this life. She was about 24 years old. Those who gathered around her witnessed not a moment of despair, but one of profound peace. She died among people who loved her, in a place where her faith had finally found freedom. Her journey, marked by suffering and fidelity, came to its gentle and holy completion. Her final words, simple and filled with love, remained in the hearts of those who heard them. Jesus, Mary, I love you. These were not merely words spoken at the end, but the expression of a life lived in devotion. They revealed the center of her soul, the truth she had carried from her baptism until her final breath, a love that neither suffering nor death could diminish. Soon after her passing, something remarkable was noticed. The scars that had marked her face for so many years seemed to fade, and her features took on a radiant beauty. Those present were deeply moved by this change. For them, it was a sign, a quiet confirmation of the grace that had transformed her life. In death, as in life, Kateri reflected a holiness that spoke without words. Chapter 7. Canonization, Veneration, and Spiritual Legacy. After her death, the memory of Kateri did not fade, but instead began to spread quietly among those who had known her. People spoke of her purity, her patience in suffering, and her deep love for God. What had once been hidden within her silent life now became visible through the testimonies of others. Her reputation for holiness grew, not through grand deeds, but through the enduring witness of a life faithfully lived. In the weeks that followed, several individuals reported extraordinary experiences connected to her. Close companions and members of the community spoke of visions in which Kateri appeared, radiant and filled with peace. These accounts were received with reverence and wonder. For many, they were not merely stories, but signs that her soul had entered into the fullness of God's presence, continuing to draw others toward Him. As time passed, devotion to Kateri continued to grow. People began to visit her resting place, seeking comfort and spiritual strength. Pilgrimages formed, sometimes small and quiet, yet deeply sincere. Her grave became a place of prayer, where hearts were lifted and intentions entrusted. In this simple way, her presence remained alive among the faithful, guiding them gently through her example and intercession. Alongside this growing devotion, many reported favors and healings received through her intercession. These were often humble and personal, yet deeply meaningful to those who experienced them. Over time, such accounts were carefully gathered and examined by the Church. Through these signs, the faithful came to recognize that Kateri's life, though hidden in many ways, continued to bear fruit beyond her earthly years. Centuries later, the Church formally recognized her holiness. In 1980, she was declared blessed by Pope John Paul II. This moment affirmed what many had long believed, that her life reflected the grace of God in a profound and authentic way. Her witness, rooted in humility and fidelity, was now held up for the wider Church to contemplate and honor. The journey towards sainthood reached its fulfillment in 2012, when Pope Benedict XVI canonized her in Rome. With this declaration, Kateri Tekakwitha became the first Native American saint of North America. It was a moment of joy, not only for the Church, but also for many indigenous communities, who saw in her a reflection of their own history, struggles, and dignity. Today, Kateri stands as a symbol of holiness that transcends cultures. Her life forms a bridge between indigenous traditions and the Christian faith, showing that grace can take root in every human heart. She reminds us that sanctity is not limited by background or circumstance. In her quiet fidelity, she continues to inspire countless people to seek God with sincerity, courage, and a love that endures. Chapter 8. A Prayer to Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. O Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, pure lily among your people and gentle witness of God's love, we come before you with humble hearts. You who remained faithful in silence and suffering, teach us to seek holiness not in greatness, but in simplicity. Help us to trust that even in hidden lives, God's grace can shine beautifully and transform the world. In the midst of trials and uncertainties, help us remain faithful to the Lord as you did. When we are misunderstood, rejected, or tested, give us the strength to persevere with quiet courage. May we never turn away from Christ, but hold firmly to Him, knowing that true peace is found not in comfort, but in steadfast love and trust. Teach us, dear Saint Kateri, to love a life of prayer. In a world filled with noise and distraction, guide us into the silence where God speaks to the heart. Help us to seek Him daily, to listen with openness, and to find joy in His presence. May prayer become our refuge, our strength, and our deepest source of peace. Remember especially those who feel alone, forgotten, or misunderstood. You who walk the path of isolation, look with compassion upon them. Intercede for those who are rejected because of their faith or their differences. May they find comfort in God's love and discover that they are never truly alone, for He walks with them always. Help us to offer our lives completely to God, as you did with such sincerity. Teach us to surrender our desires, our fears, and our plans into His hands. May we learn to give not only in moments of ease, but also in sacrifice, trusting that every offering made in love becomes a gift pleasing to Him. Guide us, Saint Kateri, in living a life where faith and daily life are united. Help us to carry the gospel into our families, our work, and our relationships. May we reflect Christ in our actions, bringing light where there is darkness and hope where there is despair, just as you quietly did in your own time. Finally, we ask for your intercession, that we too may grow in holiness. Lead us closer to Jesus, your beloved spouse, and help us to walk faithfully on the path toward heaven. May our lives, like yours, become a witness of love and grace until the day we are united with God forever. Amen.